Happy spring, Easter, whatever you celebrate. Beautiful Sunday. Today is a fruit day in the biodynamic calendar. And as I'm getting ready to bottle Rasa 2021, I thought I would again say a couple of more specific things on why biodynamics applies specifically to my perfume and the way that I work. And I would say that there's this kind of incredible woman who always worked in biodynamic winemaking. She grew up that way, and so she already knew a lot about that, and she was an avid gardener, and she started to notice that all of the principles of biodynamics were really applying to wine, and even the some of the most hardened sommeliers, master sommeliers that believe in absolutely zero woo-woo anything, often followed by this, because for whatever reason it does tend to be true. And so I was just going to explain a little why biodynamics apply to some things but not maybe things made in a lab. So for wine, the view is that wine is kind of still a living, evolving spirit, organism, whatever, right? Which it is. So I'm going to pull up, this is actually an Austrian skin contact wine, which made with skin contact, whoa, skin contact and stems. And you can see it's like a little cloudy. They actually encourage you to shake it before you drink it. And it has enough skin contact that technically this is an orange wine, although, it doesn't look orange. And so there's so much dry matter in this, hence it being allowed to be cloudy like this, that it's very similar in a lot of ways to my perfume. Even though this Rasa doesn't look terribly cloudy right now, the first bottle that I have done from this year that I did as a sample, you kind of can't tell, but there's still some, like a little bit of cloud from that skin contact. So why are these things important? I mean, number one, with the Rasa and with that passion fruit, and this is true with Beulah as well, there is some fermentation that's going on in my process. So there's still this active living, breathing, and evolving aspect to the base perfume. Even though I do hand select beautiful organic artisanal alcohols, lychee, coconut, grape, that I work with, depending on what things I want to highlight. But I also do some fermentation of fruit, or sometimes secondary fermentation with the fruit. So in many ways, similar to wine, the perfume is still going to be aging and evolving because it has that living, still in a state of fermenting, hasn't kind of had all the good stuff sucked back out of it. So it's still evolving and changing over time the way that a wine does, which I love because for all of you guys out there who are oud nerds like me, I mean, you know that is kind of what oud on its own does, right? So when oud is allowed to not be messed with and thrown in with a bunch of like petrochemicals or anything like that, when it's allowed to sort of just be in a more natural composition, and there's so many like great artists out there who are working with oud right now, it is this wild and crazy, evolving ride, mind of its own that just transforms over time and will appear to change on your skin in so many different ways. And it's like this wonderful mystery, which is what makes oud I think so awesome, if you ask me. And so I wanted, I always want my entire composition that has oud to function in that way. And so that's why I think whole natural ingredients and then a base of things that still has that like living juice to it is so important, especially when aging with oud, because not only is this 2021 Rasa like brighter and more fruity, much more similar to the 2019 Rasa, but I also really want to pop that top fruit note, because even though as I've aged passion fruit and been working with it, through the years, it took me, a while to sort of learn how to play with it, how to work with it, how to ferment it, which types of passion fruit do what. That's been a whole journey. But I also want that top note to be so totally bright that if in time it softens the way that a wine would do, like on that very top, it's still presenting that fruit and kind of hugging around the flowers and the oud, and it's able to change into this whole other thing, which is kind of what happens when you have all those extra molecules of whole ingredients, when you aren't like isolating things. And so it still has that living, breathing aspect of nature that corresponds with biodynamics. And biodynamics, again, it's like some people find it woo-woo because some of it correlates to the moon, right? But we also notice that, you know, emergency rooms are filled on the full moon, right? So there are some things that through time we've looked at as these ancient practices that are totally crazy, but now people are starting to come around and find out that there is something to it and they really do work. Biodynamic farming, for example, is a wonderful regenerative practice. Before Rudolf Steiner came along, who coined the term biodynamics, there were these practices that had been existing for quite some time. And I think they have a lot to teach us. And so today I am enjoying this Heinrich Austrian Neuburger Freiheit, I will never say it right, wonderful orange skin contact wine. And there's almost a salty thing to this, which I think is just so interesting and cool and amazing. And so I'm having it a little bit with some pears and strawberry, and of course some passion fruit, since I was about to pop the Rasa 2021. But actually I brought this out because this rosé, which is just 100% sort of sparkling Pinot Noir, is showing much more those red fruit top notes that the passion fruit does. So if I'm going to have some of my first smells of the 2021 on a strip, this is kind of a great way to do it. And the reason that I do things together is you get something different. I mean, I guess that's why they call it retronasal olfaction, right? You get something different when you smell, taste, and then smell again. It helps you have a whole different experience, not just of the wine, but the perfume. So on its own, this Rasa was showing super, super bright red passion fruit today, like crazy, okay? But when you put your nose in a passion fruit and you can see that there's still that same top there, and you let this sit for a second, what you start to experience is that passion fruit as it journeys through all of the other ingredients, as it turns to that sweeter cashmere saffron, the pink lotus, the dewy rue, that plumeria that's in there, and of course the oud as it's like easing in with that saffron. And these ouds are very atypical. You know, atypical, I mean, other than the oud shoyub, which I may not be saying right that from Ansar Oud, I just have a little in there as a highlight, as an oomph. But the rest of the ouds in this are non-soak hindi ouds, very delicate, sweet, floral, kind of atypical. And so I really wanted to bring out maybe those aspects of ouds that people don't always associate and realize are possible. Although believe me, I'm all for a good funky oud as well, but I just thought what a wonderful way to celebrate these other aspects that we don't always think of when we think of Hindi ouds, right? I think all of us, those of us who follow oud, they think of a little bit more like, you know, funk, blue cheese, beat, crazy thing, which I actually adore, right? Because when it starts there, it really is such an incredible journey. But what I love about this is it's really allowing those small distillation flowers that I got from India to show, and the saffron in it just has blended in such an interesting way, where one moment you think that's flower, but really it's the flower and the oud and how they've married together, which is kind of interesting to me. I wish we had smell-o-vision here so you guys could smell what I'm smelling. It really is such an interesting experience when you smell and then drink, which leads me to another point, which is of note. And this is why you can't do perfume and wine pairing with synthetics. And it's absolutely nothing against my friends who work in mixed media or synthetic arts. It's none of that. It's just a culinary principle, right? I mean, I don't know how many of you out there have worked in restaurants or worked for a chef or in a wine program, but rule number one is you cannot wear perfume. You cannot wear perfume because, and especially, synthetics or things with isolates, the molecules are just sort of different than what is existing in nature or growing out of the land. It just is fundamentally different, and they're stickier is how I view it, and they actually get in the way of your experience of smelling and tasting that food and wine. And so it's blocking your experience of that wine, or it's blocking your experience of that food. Whereas right now, this makes this a whole other planet, and vice versa. They're supporting one another, and they're enhancing the overall experience that I'm having here, which makes me discover new things in the glass, and it makes me discover new things in the perfume, which is why I absolutely love doing this. I was sitting one day in a Barolo tasting, and it was spring in Venice, and like the jasmine were everywhere, and it was just gorgeous out. And it was this incredible Barolo lineup, and for those of you who aren't wine nerds, Barolo is made with the Nebbiolo grape and Piemonte in Italy, and it's a very special wine and something that I hold close to my heart. It classically has tar and roses, licorice, truffle components is what people identify, but it also has this beautiful red fruit. But there's a lot of jasmine that grows, of course, in Italy and in Piemonte that would sometimes be adjacent to those vineyards, and is just naturally, all around Italy. So as we were sitting down to this tasting, and I think it was a library tasting of, vintage by vintage of this Barolo that was absolutely stunning, I noticed how enhanced all of our experiences were because we were just sitting next to this perfect spring jasmine that was blooming. And I thought it was interesting because I was sitting there with a chef, another sommelier, and somebody from the winery, on how much this jasmine was just making our experience even more beautiful. And I believe that is what whole ingredient naturals have sometimes to offer wine. I mean, of course, only as it applies to pairing principles. Jasmine is not necessarily something you would maybe pick up in a Barolo, right? I get more of maybe a rose component, but for whatever reason they just sort of married, blocked up aromatically, and made the experience even more beautiful. And so that's what I try to do with my food, perfume and wine pairings, to really enhance that. And that's why it's important that people understand, you probably cannot do this with anything has a lot of isolates or petrochemicals in them. Specifically, I think it works better in mind with the fruit bases that are made a little more similarly to wine, because it's still using that same sort of living ingredient logic that applies to wine. In other words, it has top, middle, and base notes. Not that all perfume doesn't, but it ages in a particular kind of way, and it's sort of living and breathing and functioning in that same kind of universe, which is why it's so much fun, to put them together. Anyway, I I hope everybody has a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful Sunday. And again, it's a fruit day, so if you're a wine drinker, I encourage you to have some wine or open that special bottle today. If you were next to, if there's any flowers blooming near your house, even though it's a fruit day, not a flower day, today is a great day to smell those flowers, because there's that, eternal relationship between the fruit and the flower. They're different faces of a same thing. So yeah, maybe you'll use this an occasion to smell something beautiful, or if you have a natural fragrance, now would be the day to pop that in your nose. I was, reminded of my friend Layla at Perfume Fragrances this morning, because I was, as I did Easter with my daughter, we kept walking by all of the lime neroli and the lemon neroli and the orange neroli, and of course that flower always reminds me of her, and I know she uses a lot of that ingredient in her perfume. So you don't have to be a purist if somebody's mixed media, but they use a high amount of naturals. You can try that on a fruit and flower day, and it's probably going to shine. It's going to perk up a little bit as well. So it's just kind of a fun thing, and I've gone on way too long. I hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful Sunday, Easter if you celebrate it, and chin chin.